Hello. Today, let's dive new videos. This is system design, how to store passwords in the database, made by Byte This video is very short, only 3 and 44 minutes mark, 3 minutes and 44 seconds mark. It's very short, so maybe today I'd like to try shadowing mm, only half section. Mm. And let me introduce the very convenient service. This is Turbo Scribe. We can uh, how do I say 文字起こし? How do I say 文字起こし? Scribe? Transcribe? Hello, ChatGPT. How can I say 文字起こし in English?
You can say transcription in English. It refers to the
Transcription.
process of converting.
Transcribe is a very convenient transcription tool. Helpful. Uh, how to use? It's very easy. You have to enter a YouTube link URL or upload your local file, MP3, MP4, etc. And this is execution button. I prefer this. I prefer this service. Today's transcription is here. And of course, I printed it. Okay, let's start. And let's start to my stopwatch. Maybe my plan is only 30 minutes. Yes, let's listening.
Passwords safely in the database. How do we validate How do we store passwords safely in the database? How do we validate a password a user enter against what we store in the database? Let's take a look.
Let's take a look.
It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them, even if the database is compromised. Let's talk about what not to do first. Do not store passwords in plain text. Anyone with internal access to the database can see them. If the database is compromised, an attacker could easily get all the passwords. So what should we do to safely store passwords in the database? The Open Web Application Security Project, also known as OWASP, provided some guidelines on how to store passwords. Here are the recommendations.
This is guideline.
First, use a modern hashing algorithm. Hashing is a one-way function. It is impossible to decrypt a hash to obtain the original value. If an attacker obtains the hashed password, they cannot just enter it into the application to gain access. It is important to use a modern hashing function designed to securely store passwords. These are sometimes characterized as slow functions that use more resources to compute. This makes brute force attacks unattractive. Note that some common legacy hashing functions like MD5 and SHA-1
common hashing function is
they are less
MD5
secure
and
and
SHA-1.
should not be used.
First,
second, sort the passwords. According to the OWASP guidelines, a salt is a unique, randomly generated string that is added to each password as a part of the hashing process. Why do we need to sort the password at all? Well, storing a password as a one-way hash is a step in the right direction, but it is not sufficient. An attacker can defeat one-way hashes with precomputation attacks. Some common attacks are rainbow tables and database-based lookups, With these techniques, a hacker could crack a password in seconds. By adding a salt that is unique to each password to the hashing process, it ensures that the hash is
I'm not sure about this part.
rainbow hashes with precomputation attacks. Some common attacks are rainbow tables
This is how to attack the database.
and database-based lookups. With these
Database lookups.
techniques, a hacker could crack a password in seconds.
How cook passwords in seconds?
By adding a salt that is
Hmm.
unique to each password to the hashing process, it ensures that the hash is unique to each password. This simple technique makes precomputation attacks unattractive. Let's take a look at how we store a password in a salt. We first combine the password provided by the user with the randomly generated salt. We then compute the hash of this combination using an appropriate hashing function. The hash is stored in the database along with the salt. Again, the salt is used to generate a unique hash. It is not a secret and can be stored safely as plain text in the database. Finally, let's take a look at the process in reverse. When a user logs in, how do we validate the password against what is stored in the database? First, we fetch the salt for the user. The process in reverse. When a user logs in, how do we validate the password against what is stored in the database?
How do we validate
First,
the
we
stored
fetch the
database?
salt for the user from the
Stored
database.
database.
We then append the salt to the password provided by the user and hash it. We compare this computer hash against the hash stored in the database. If they are the same, the password is valid. That's it about storing passwords in the database. You would like to learn more about
This video is about very common concept and base knowledge of software engineer. But however, this basic knowledge is very important, very valuable because because the basic knowledge such as like this very useful and we can use this knowledge wherever wherever and whenever you can use. So this video is very sophisticated and invaluable. Okay, anyway, I'd like to confirm my understanding and I'd like to look up each sentence meaning. So step by step, let's let's check each sentence meaning. First,
how do we store passwords safely in the database?
how do we store passwords safely in the database? How do we store passwords safely in the database? Makes sense. I can comprehend.
How do we validate a password a user enters against what we store in the database?
How do we validate? How do we validate?
How do we validate a password a user enters
How do we validate a password?
against what we store in the database? How do we validate a password a user
How do we validate the password user
enter against what we store in the
against
database?
restore database? Validate the password a user enters against what we store in the database. Against, enter against. How do we validate a password? A user enters against what we store in the database. Ah, validate a password a user enters against what we store in the database. against は、何々と対応するみたいな感じで使われるのかな。はい、チャット GPT. Ca- if if my understood correctly, uh, I think how do we validate a password a user enters against what we store in the database? This sentence, against means corresponding to and or validate A against B is a very common phrase. Is it right?
Yes, you've got it. In that context, validate a password a user enters against what we store in the database means you're comparing the entered password with the stored value to check if they match. The phrase validate A against B is indeed a common way to say that you're verifying or checking one thing in relation to another. You're welcome. If you have any more questions or need further clarification, just let me know.
はいはいはい。Validate the password a user enters against what we store in the database. A against B. How do we validate a password a user enters? Password a user enters. Password a user enters. Against what we store in the database. Validate means checking. Is it right? A is B. Is it right? This is validate. Next.
Let's take a look.
Let's take a look.
It is essential to
It
store
is
passwords in a
essential
way
to
that
store
keeps an
password in the
attacker
way
from
that
getting them, even if
one more
enter
time.
against what we store in the database. Let's take a look. It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them.
It is essential to keep.
It's essential to store passwords in a way
It's essential to store password.
that keeps an attacker from
Keep
getting
the
them.
attack from
Even
getting them.
it's essential to what we store in the database passwords in a way that keeps an take a look. It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an
To store password in the way
attacker from getting them. It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker
to store password in the way that keeps an attacker from getting them. Uh, I'm not sure about in a way that in a way that validate A against B in a way that What mean in a way that, for example, it is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them. What does in a way that mean? Let's break your sentence down. It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them. In a way that, 何々 using a method that, in a way that plus close, store passwords in a way that protect user data, design the API in a way that reduces latency, write code in a way that it's easy to maintain, in a way that using a method that keeps from keeps an attacker from getting them. What does in a way that mean? What does this phrase mean? Keep someone from INC. But this is basic this is basic phrase. Keep someone from INC. Keep someone from INC. Keep someone from INC. Hashing passwords keeps attackers from reading them. Rate limiting keeps bots from spamming the API. In a way that validate against B. In a way that keep someone from INC. Hmm. Very good video. Very good English textbook. It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them. Storing passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them. So defense, saving the data from attackers. Next, even if
Hacker from getting them, even if the database is
even if
compromised.
database compromised. Even if the database is compromised. Compromised. Compromise. Mm, I guess I'm assume that this meaning, this meaning is secure or very safety, I think. What does compromised mean? For example, it is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps an attacker from getting them, even if the database is compromised. Compromised. Compromised is a very important word in security and backend engineering. You will see it everywhere. Docs, instant reports, interviews. Let's make it clear. Core meaning, compromised is exposed to an attacker, no longer secure. Oh, opposite meaning, against. You must assume attackers may have access. May have access. Compromise, exposed to an attacker, no longer secure. Something that was trusted is now broken from a security perspective. Not destroyed, not necessarily leaked yet. But you must assume attackers may have access. Oh, compromised. Even if hackers break into your database, they still cannot read user passwords. Oh, this is exactly why we hash passwords. Senior engineers think in this way. Assume breach. Very important English mindset. Strong engineers don't ask, how do we stop attacks completely? They ask, if this system gets compromised, how much damage happens? This is called blast radius reduction. Hashed passwords attacker cannot log in easily. Token expiration, stolen tokens become useless. Typical things that get compromised. You should get comfortable hearing these: database compromised, credential compromised, API key compromised, server compromised, account compromised. Example, we detected that an API key was compromised and rotated it immediately. Uh, Compromise. This is the difference. Different. Verb meaning negotiate. Compromise. Compromise. Hmm? Compromised. Compromise. 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 Is security meaning this server was compromised. Negotiation meaning we compromised and agreed on middle ground. Totally different. Engineers almost always mean security. Context tells you instantly. Project sound like a senior. Um, 日本語でも説明して。うん。セキュリティが破られた状態が compromised か。完全に乗っ取られた、完全に盗まれたとは限らないけど、攻撃者がアクセスできる可能性がある前提で動く必要がある状態。Even if the database is compromised, データベースが侵害されたとしても、うん、the account was compromised. まあ、ネガティブな文脈でよく出てくるわな。じゃあ、コンプロマイズは、1はセキュリティの話、1はセキュリティ、2は妥協って意味がある。We compromised. で、エンジニア文脈では、99% security meaning. So even if the database is compromised, even if the database is almost broken, uh, it is essential to store passwords. Storing password to keep an attacker from getting them is important, essential, essential. I'm gonna use this word, essential. because every day I very often, frequently using important variable. My vocabulary is very short. My vocabulary is very less. So I'd like to use essential. Okay, next. Wow, only 7 minutes left.
Let's talk about what not to do
Let's
first.
talk about what to
Do not
Let's talk about what not to do first. What not to do first. What not to do first. I hear this phrase for the first time. So, what not to do first? What not to do first? Let's talk about what not to do first. Mm, good expression.
do not store
Do
passwords
not
in
store
plain
password
text.
in plain text. Do not store passwords in plain text. Yeah, of course. 100% I believe. Don't store passwords in plain text.
Anyone with internal
Anyone with
access to the
internal
database
access
can
to the
see them.
database can see them. Anyone with internal access? Anyone with internal access to the database can see them.
If the database is compromised,
If the database is compromised,
an attacker could
an
easily get all the
could easily
passwords.
get all the passwords. Mm.
So what should we do to safely
So,
store password in the database? The passwords. So what should we do to safely store password in the database?
so what should wash
All the passwords. So what should we do to safely
what should what should what should we can pronounce what should we what what should we do to what should we to do safely store passwords in the database? What should we to do
store password in the database? Get all the passwords.
get all the passwords?
So what should we
So
do
what
to
should we
safely store
to
password
the
in the database?
safely database?
Passwords. So what should we do
What
to
should
safely
we
store
to
password in the database?
do the safely what should do to safely store password in the database?
The passwords. So what should we do to safely store password in the database?
So what should do to safely store passwords in the database? What should do what should do what should we to what should we do to what should we do to safely store passwords in the database?
All the passwords. So what should we
What
do to
should we
safely
do
store
to
password in the
what should we do to the safely store passwords in the
database? The
database?
passwords. So what should we do to safely store password in the
Safely
database?
store passwords in database. What should we do to store? What should we do to safely store the what should we do to safely store passwords in the database?
The Open Web Application
Open Web
Security
Application
Project,
Security
also known as
Project,
OWASP.
OWASP. The Open Web Application Security Project, also known as OWASP,
Provided some
provided
guidelines on
some
how to store
guidelines how to
passwords.
store passwords.
Here are the
Here are the
recommendations.
recommendations.
First,
First,
use a modern
use a
hashing
modern hashing
algorithm.
algorithm.
Hashing is a one-way
Hashing is a
function.
one-way
It is
function. Hashing is a one-way function. One-way function. Dual way. Hmm. How can I say mm, the opposite of one-way function? Reversible function, invertible function, two-way function. But this is important. Engineers most often say reversible, invertible, anti-one-way, or anything like that. One-way function is easy to compute forward, extremely hard to reverse, like hashing function. Opposite concept is a reversible, invertible, reversible function. Mm, reversible func, opposite. この意味の反対の言葉は何ですかって言いたいときって、How can I say A of the opposite meaning, opposite word って合ってる？あ、間違えた。英語でこの言葉の反対の言葉を教えてってちゃんと言いたいときに、Could you tell me the opposite of one-way function とかで合ってる？ Could you tell me the opposite of a one-way function? これ完全に自然正しい。あ、いいんだ。Could you tell me the opposite of one-way function? What is the opposite of a one-way function? What is the opposite one of a one-way function? What is the, oh, finish, time up. Only 1 minute mark. Okay, let's review total. How do we store passwords safely in the database? Hmm. How to store passwords in the database. How do we validate a password? User enter. Uh, how do we validate a password? A user enter against what we store in the database. Hmm. Let's take a Let's take a look. It is essential to store passwords in a way that keeps attackers from uh, getting getting them, even if the database is compromised. Mm. If the database was broken by attackers, uh, how to store how to store and how to prevent the getting how to prevent the attacker getting them. This is essential. Let's talk about what not to do first. Not to do. You mustn't. You don't have to. No. You mustn't. You should not. Not have to. Not to do first. Do not store passwords in the plain text. Yes, of course. It's very essential. Anyone with internal access to the database can see them. If the database is compromised, an attacker could easily get all the passwords. Yeah, makes sense. So what should we do to safely store passwords in the database? So what should we do to safely store passwords in the database? So what should we do to safely store passwords in the database? So what should we do to safely store passwords in the database? Hmm. I confused the order of this sentence structure. So what should we do? What should we do is a normal order. And two, to safely store password. Safely is adverbs. Hmm. So you can use in front of the verb. Safely store passwords in the database. Mm. The Open Web Application Security Project, also known as OWASP, provided some guidelines on how to store passwords. It's easy to understand. Here are the recommendations. First, use a modern hashing algorithm. Hashing is a one-way function. Mm. Today, I have a time to practice enough. So one more 10 minutes. More 10 minutes. Let's start. Okay, let's start where we left off.
It's impossible to
It
decrypt
is
a hash
impossible to
to obtain
decrypt
the
the
original
hash to
value.
obtain the original value. It is important to
It is impossible to decrypt a hash
decrypt
to
the
obtain the
hash
original
to
value.
obtain the
If an
original value. To obtain. Obtain means get. Decrypt means opposite of encrypt. Mm. It is important to decrypt the hash to obtain the original value.
if an attacker obtains the
If
hashed
the attacker
password,
obtains
they
hashed
cannot
password. If the attacker obtains a hashed password,
just enter
they
it into
cannot
the
just enter
application to
it
gain
into the
access.
application to gain access.
Hash to obtain the
To
original
obtain the
value.
original
If
value.
an
If the
attacker
attacker
obtains the hashed
obtains the
password,
hashed
they cannot
password,
just enter
they
it
cannot
into the
enter
application to gain
the
access.
one
The
more time.
hashed password. They cannot just enter it into the
Just enter
application to
it.
gain access.
They cannot just enter it into the application to gain access. Uh, Obtain, gain, get. This is similar meaning. What's the difference of what's the difference what's the difference between obtain and get and gain?
Great question. These three verbs, obtain, get, and gain, are often used interchangeably, but they have subtle differences in connotation and usage. Let's break them down. In general, to receive, come to have, or take possession of something. Its usage is very broad and casual, can refer to almost anything, objects, information, states, etc. I need to get some groceries. Did you get my email? He wants to get a new job. More formal and deliberate, to acquire something through effort, request, or a formal process. Often used in official, academic, or legal contexts, implies a conscious effort or process. She obtained a visa after a lengthy application process. You must obtain permission before using this software. He obtained a degree in engineering. Implies an increase, especially in non-material things. To gradually acquire or increase something, often intangible, like experience, skills, or an advantage. Usage is common with abstract nouns like knowledge, weight, popularity, etc. She gained a lot of experience working there. He gained a competitive edge over the holidays. Get is very general, can apply to almost anything, both tangible and intangible. Obtain, more formal, often involves effort or a process. Gain typically refers to something intangible or an increase in something. If you want to sound more professional in formal writing,
More formal often involves effort or process. She obtained a visa after lengthy application process. You must obtain permission before using the software. She gained a lot of experience. She gained a competitive edge, gained knowledge, weight, popularity, experience, skills, and advantage. Advantage. Okay, got it. I got it.
It is important to use a modern
It
hashing
is
function
important to
designed
use a modern
to
hashing
securely
function
store
designed to securely
passwords.
store passwords. One more time.
Use a modern into the application to gain
Into the
access.
application looking at
It is important to use
It
a
is
modern
important to
hashing
use
function
modern
designed
hashing
to
function
securely
designed for
store
security
passwords.
store passwords. It is important to use modern hashing function designed to security store passwords.
These are sometimes
These are
characterized as
sometimes
slow
characterized as
functions
slow
that
functions.
use more resources to compute.
They use more. They're sometimes characterized as slow functions that use more resources to compute. They are sometimes characterized as slow functions that use more resources to compute.
This makes brute
This
force
makes
attacks
brute force
unattractive.
attacks unattractive. One process is slow. Uh, this function is that one process, the process of it, the process, mm, mm, slow function means that process is very slow, so that makes brute force attacks unattractive. That makes brute force attack unattractive.
Note that some common legacy hashing functions
Know that some note that note that note that note that know that some common
like
legacy hashing
MD5 and
function
SHA-1
MD5
are
and
fast.
SHA-1 are
They are less
fast.
secure
They are
and
less
should not be
secure and
used.
should not used.
Second, sort the
Second, sort the
passwords.
passwords. First, first, we use a modern hashing algorithm. Slow function. Bcrypt.
According to the
According to
OWASP
the
guidelines, a
According to the OWASP guidelines,
salt is a unique,
also
randomly
unique
generated
random
string that
generated
is added to
string
each password
that
as
is
a
used
part of
each
the hashing
part of
process.
hashing process.
Why do we need to sort the
Why do we
password at
need to
all?
need password
Well,
at all?
storing a password
Storing
as a
a
one-way
password
hash
one-way
is a step in
hash
the right
is
direction,
the right
but it is
direction,
not
but it is
sufficient.
not sufficient. Some common legacy hashing function like MD5. Okay. Second, sort the password. Sort the passwords. According to the OWASP guidelines, a sort is unique, randomly generated string that is added to each password as a part of the hashing process. Why do we need to sort the password at all. Storing a password as a one-way hash is a step in the right direction, but it is not sufficient. An attacker can defeat one-way hashes with precomputation attacks.
Need to sort the password at all? Out of the hashing process. Why do we need added to each? A salt is a unique, randomly generated string that is added to each password as a part of the hashing process.
A sort is unique, randomly generated string that is added to each password as a part of the hashing process. They are less secure and should not be used. Second, sort the passwords. According to OWSP guidelines, a sort is a unique
that is added to each
that is
password
added
as
to
a
each
part of the
password.
hashing process. Generated string OWASP guidelines. Second, sort the passwords.
Sort the passwords.
According to the
According to the
OWASP guidelines, a salt is a
salt
unique,
is a
randomly
unique,
generated string that is added to each password as a part of the hashing process.
Process.
Why do we need to sort the password at all?
Sort the password at all?
Well, storing a password as a one-way hash is a step in the right direction, but it is not sufficient. An attacker can defeat one-way hashes with precomputation attacks.
Only hashing function. Even if it is one-way function, but attackers can understand the how to solve the hashing method. Maybe gradually. So you have to use more 対策ってなんて言うんだろうな。対策。なんか英語で対策、何々への対策、災害への対策とか、ハッカーへの対策とか、その対策ってどういう単語、表現がある？ measure 対策。countermeasure 脅威に対する対策。security measure safety measures countermeasures against hackers。DDoS mitigation リスクmitigation take measures 対策を講じる take measure mitigation precomputation attack. What does precomputation attacks mean? What does a precomputation attack mean?
Precomputation attack is a security vulnerability used in cryptography when you mean a big attack surface area. Precomputation attack is generally translated into English as calculated attack. meaning generating something or an attack that could be used to compromise or exploit. First, think about password protection attacks. We know cryptographic hashing algorithms and shift mapping make it easier to match the hash to the password. The more hashes or hash tips you collect, the more decoding is done. Compromised credential stuffing and decoding the plain text is done. This is when you use precomputation attacks to gather decoded hash tips and put them into a comparable form with their hashes. Passwords are not hashed randomly, so that later on you can't rely on the salt as closely as you do without one. Precomputation attacks help you do this faster because
if I understood correctly, precomputation attacks means previous calculation attacks. Is it right?
you're on the right track. Let me refine that a bit to make it clearer and more natural. Precomputation attacks refer to attacks where the attacker pre-calculates data, often large sets of possible inputs and their corresponding outputs beforehand, so that when they launch the attack, they can quickly match the pre-computed data against the target. In other words, they do a lot of the heavy lifting, the computations, ahead of time, making the actual attack phase much faster and more efficient.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap up. Today's practice is finished. See you next tomorrow. Bye bye. Stop.